All right, let's talk Dallas Cowboys. I'm Nick, and this is our daily Cowboys show. Still coming to you guys from my porch. The family Thanksgiving stuff isn't quite done yet, so I am sitting out here in the cold. It is below freezing, but that doesn't mean we won't talk Dallas Cowboys, and there's a lot of interesting stuff to get to, especially now that the Cowboys, a little bit of momentum now, 3-game winning streak, of course, still riding high after beating the Kansas City Chiefs. But before we get into the news, let's start, as we always do, with a little stat of the day, a little palate cleanser, if you will. I'm going to pull this up courtesy of PFF. They posted this on their X account. I think it's pretty important to call out. They wrote, Quinnon Williams this season, 21 pressures in 3 games with Dallas, 19 in the prior 8 games with the New York Jets. Obviously, Quinnon Williams has showed up and done outstanding things with the Dallas Cowboys. A big reason the Cowboys wanted Williams was because they hired his former defensive line coach, Aaron Whitecotton, and Whitecotton has utilized Williams, along with Eberflus, give credit where credit is due, to an extremely productive level so far in 3 games with the Cowboys. But it also speaks to the important part, not just of the Cowboys adding talent with Quinnon Williams, but the fact the Cowboys did have some good pieces, and adding Quinnon Williams made it easier for number 92 as well. So if you look at Quinnon Williams with the Jets, they had some injuries, but they had some concerns at pass rusher. They weren't, Will McDonald was beat up. Johnson was beat up. Their other good pass rusher. Not a lot of great disruptors at defensive tackle outside of Quinnon Williams. The Cowboys, remember, they still had Oso Odighizuwa, who's a good disruptive pass rusher, not so good against the run consistently. Can make some plays against the run, but he's not as good as, say, a Williams is, but he's a good player. Kenny Clark, a good, solid veteran player. You add in Quinnon Williams, and of course you have Clowney emerging as a Raku, doing a lot of good things as a rookie. Put a film review out yesterday. If you haven't checked it out, make sure you do that as well. But you add him to the Dallas Cowboys, and not only are the Cowboys around Williams better, Oso Odighizuwa, Clark, Ezaraku, Clowney, Overshown, linebackers in general, all those guys, Quinnon Williams gets better as well. And if we compare and contrast this, because I know there's going to be a lot of sort of discussion around the Parsons trade and things like that. If you talk about people with Green Bay when it comes to this Packers defense, they've been, of course, over the moon with Micah Parsons, and he's had an incredible season so far for the Packers. But the rest of the defense, guys that they were hoping to get better, didn't. Lucas Van Ness, Rashawn Gary, some of their younger players and some of their veteran pass rushers haven't really improved. The production hasn't increased. So while Micah Parsons has done great things with the Packers, the guys around Parsons haven't really taken advantage of it. The Cowboys, with the deals they've made, Quinnon Williams has come in through 3 games, small sample size, but still, and done a lot of really good things. But the players around him have improved as well. And I think that's why the trades, if we're going to do plural here, getting Clark and the first-round picks for Parsons, and then, of course, adding Quinnon Williams at the trade deadline, had a massive impact for the Cowboys, both when it comes to number 92, and you can see his numbers on the screen, and the players around him. All right, let's get into the news here. His first post is courtesy of John Machota. He writes, Cowboys owner Jerry Jones on 105.3 The Fan said quarterback Trayvon Diggs, with his knee injury, will be on the field in Detroit next Thursday, in my view, barring a setback. Schottenheimer was asked about this. He said, not quite as emphatically, Jerry Jones, but said they're going to look at him in practice, but they think he will return. Said he wanted to play against the Chiefs, probably felt like he was willing and able to play, just they didn't want to on a short week, go through a lot of issues, funky practice, Thanksgiving prep, things like that. So they didn't want to push it, but it seems like they're going to really make sure Trayvon Diggs has a great opportunity to play against the Detroit Lions. So this is interesting to me, and I think one of the things that can happen when you have sort of I don't want to call Trayvon Diggs a malcontent, because I don't think that's fair, but it just wasn't meshing with the new staff, with their new scheme, their new culture on defense. Obviously he was disappointed in the Parsons trade, was coming off an injury, wasn't playing good football. But then you start winning, and suddenly your side of the football defensively plays a little bit better. Quinnon Williams comes into the fold. Overshown's back. He's a high-energy guy, super positive guy. You got Kalen Carson back. You got some young guys, Carson, Revel. They're playing football, and they're doing some good things. Reddy Stewart. Suddenly you're a veteran like Trayvon Diggs. You're like, listen, I don't want to be left out here. My career could be over. I got to step up. I got to show I can still play with these guys. And he's a competitor. He's a guy that wants to do well. He's never been a guy that's, doesn't care about winning, doesn't care about losing, doesn't care about playing well. He's always been that kind of player, right? He's a guy who was very frustrated when people called him out publicly, when the reporters or people in the media said he wasn't doing well. I said, listen, man, I'm doing my best. I think I'm doing my job. Whether you thought he was or wasn't, this is a guy in Trayvon Diggs who has always cared about winning and always cared about playing well and always cared about competing. You could say some plays, some games he didn't do as well as he should have, and other games he did absolutely outstanding, but he's always been a guy who's competed and tried to compete at a high level, and he's stepped up in big moments in the past for sure. So Trayvon Diggs is going to have an opportunity as the Cowboys prepare for the Lions, and especially in a quarterback room. Deron Bland, a little banged up coming after Thanksgiving. Not a lot of concern from the Cowboys about that. Kalen Carson, had a little hamstring tightness. They ran him before the game. Didn't feel 100% short week, so they didn't play him, right? So they a little bumped up in the, beat up in the secondary when it comes to the quarterback room a little bit. But everyone seems to be full go, at least no serious concerns for Detroit, and certainly not beyond that. So Diggs returning to the fold. I mean, suddenly you've got a cornerback room that's as deep as it gets in the National Football League, right? Revel, young guy doing some good things. Carson, young guy doing some good things. Deron Bland, Reddy Stewart. Now Trayvon Diggs. Folks, this is the most, talk about size, athleticism, versatility. They basically would have two nickel corners and Stewart and Bland. They would have two 6-foot-tall plus lengthy guys in Revel and Diggs back into the fold, and Kalen Carson's guy coming into his own as well, doing some good things for the Cowboys. So suddenly you're looking around and say they've got length, they've got versatility, they can go outside, inside. Cornerback room, especially with a revamped pass rush, suddenly looks a lot better. Now the issue with Diggs, and I think he understands this more than anybody, is that he's playing essentially for his career. Because right now, he's at the low point of his career based on his perception around the league. And I'm not talking about, the vibes of what people think about him in the locker room. I'm thinking about strictly performance. He's got major injury concerns. He's an expensive veteran. The Cowboys, based on the salary cap situation, will likely cut him for cap relief just to make sure they can restructure and restructure Prescott and then extend George Pickens and maybe re-sign Javonte Williams. So he knows right now, realistically, his Cowboys career could very likely be over, and his NFL career could likely be over because he's going to be expensive unless he shows up, shows out, and plays well. And I think that's what he's going to do, and the Cowboys correctly should take advantage of that. And listen, when healthy, I think he can still play at a high level. He certainly is the best ball hawker they have in the entire secondary. We don't know about Revel yet. Maybe he'll be great. But there's a reason that the Cowboys haven't gotten a lot of interceptions this season. I mean, you got Wilson with 2. You got Marquise Bell with 1. You got Bridges with 1, right? There's been, outside of the Bland pick 6, against Washington, there's been really not a lot of big plays from the interception side of things from the Dallas Cowboys. They're going to need some playmaking down the stretch. And I'll talk about it in a second here. In fact, let's go ahead and just jump right into it to kind of highlight what I'm talking about. This is a post I put on X a couple days ago, yesterday. And I said the Dallas Cowboys have won 3 straight games despite going -1 in turnover differential over those 3 games and going 2 for 6 on 4th down while the opponents went 5 for 6. That's a sign of sustainable success. And again, -1 in turnover differential. They won 3 straight games, guys, with 1 interception combined across all 3. Most teams, when they go on a winning streak, and the Cowboys have been like this too, it's because they get takeaways, right? They get the interceptions, they get the pick sixes. They have a game and they get 5 takeaways, right? They have a game they steal because they get a bunch of turnovers, or they go 8 for 8 on 4th down, or the other guys goes 0 for 5. The reality is that hasn't happened with Dallas. Dallas has outplayed on a snap-by-snap basis without the takeaways, without the 4th downs. Remember, they've gone 2 for 6 over the last 3. Their opponents have gone 5 for 6, right? Speaks to the differential right there between the two teams, or between the Cowboys and their opponents in those 3 games. 1 bad team against the Raiders, 2 good teams, the Eagles and Chiefs. So the reality is the Cowboys haven't gotten the takeaways yet. And at this point in the season, you look around the roster, and again, we don't know about Revel yet. We don't really know about Carson yet, But there's a real argument to be made. Who is the takeaway guy? I think Overshown he had that forced fumble against Mahomes. It was called back because of a penalty, right? Offsetting penalties, but he can be a takeaway guy. We know that. We know the pass rush, the guys can force some fumbles. Those kind of things can happen, sure. But how about turnovers in the secondary? Outside of tips and overthrows, that's really the Cowboys, all they've gotten. There's a terrible Bo Nix, miss that Bridges intercepted against Denver, which is great. And there was that deflection that Kenneth Murray made, good play by Murray against the Raiders. But outside of that, there's not a lot of turnovers, not a lot of interceptions, not even guys getting, frankly, for being honest, close. It's not like there's been a lot of dropped interceptions. There just hasn't been a lot of interceptions at all. And I think Diggs can certainly add that element, and they're going to need it down the stretch, right? Because as well as they play, and they play good, sustainable football, and I think that it's a good sign going forward, there's going to be a game where you're off. There's going to be a game where, Pickens has a couple drops. There's going to be a game where Prescott's off. There's going to be a game where a team comes up with a good plan to attack the running game. There's going to be a game where the opponent gets a kick return score or blocks a punt or something, and things aren't going your way, and you're going to need a turnover or a couple of them to kind of offset that, right? That's what the Cowboys, at some point in the season, I don't know if it's going to be against the Lions or the rest of the way, once, at least twice, they're going to need that kind of game where the turnovers or the equalizer in their favor. They've had to overcome the turnovers, right? Again, they're -1 in a 3-game winning streak, which is absolutely insane. if you look at the most correlative statistic between winning and losing, it's turnover differential. Usually, if you're negative, you're losing. If you're positive, you're winning. That's 99% of the time how it works. Cowboys have been the aberration because they've been playing so well over the past 3 games. But the reality is, you're going to need takeaways at some point because you're going to have an off day, right? And if you're going to make a run here and try and continue the momentum, you're going to need some of these turnovers, and Diggs is the guy I think that can generate them. And I don't think he's going to have to come back and play 100 snaps. He can come back in and play 40, 35, 40, right? And I think they'll be perfectly fine with that. Give him passing situations. Get him in 3rd and long, right? 2nd and long, 2-minute, things like that. I think it's a good move to make, and I think getting Diggs back would be huge for the Cowboys. And again, there still is Josh Butler lurking out as well. You talk about a cornerback room that is just so deep right now. It's a great time to be a Cowboys corner because I mean, there are just so many bodies. What a change since the start of the season. It just speaks to how different this team is now, right? How better do we feel about linebacker with Overshown back into the mix, right? Making some plays. He hasn't even had that dynamic play yet, but he's been making some plays. Defensive line, so much better. Listen, safety position, still not very good. Edge rusher, need more guys for sure. Ezra doing good, Clowney doing good, but they need some long-term answers there. So they still have some flaws. That's undeniable. But boy, you talk about weakness. Defensive line and corner, the way we were feeling after 3, 4, 5 games, suddenly it's a massive strength in both fronts. Great sign for the Cowboys, not just for this year, but for the future. All right. Oh, sorry, going backwards, guys. Let me talk about the safety position here, courtesy of Nick Harris. Cowboys safety Malik Hooker is dealing with back spasms, according to head coach Brian Schottenheimer. We'll monitor him. The guys have today and tomorrow off. It's been a short 11 days, but he should be fine. Yeah, he didn't play a whole lot down the stretch. I mean, he played a healthy amount against the Chiefs, but he was having back issues. It's one of those things I hate Thursday games. Both teams were beat up. By the second half, the Chiefs were down a bunch of linemen. The Cowboys were down a bunch of people in the secondary. You had Hooker out. You had Bland battling through some injuries, right? You had Kalen Carson that couldn't play. Revel had to leave the game at one point. It became one of those things where these Thursday games so much become wars of attrition, which I personally hate. I hate when games become that way because it's like, oh, that's awesome. I want to see the 3rd team left tackle go up against my 3rd team defensive end. Not that happened, but you see that sometimes, right? You have a 3rd team left tackle going against a starting defensive end. Can that starting defensive end get there before your 3rd team corner goes up against their number 1 receiver, right? And I understand football injuries happen, things like that, but I think this is a function of these short turnarounds, these Thursday games and things like that. The Cowboys, of course, they get at least a full week off. The Lions are in the same boat. They played a physically exhausting game. They've got some injuries, too, on a short week. It's one of those things that I don't like. I'd rather every single team be 100% healthy or as healthy as you possibly can be week to week. I understand injuries happen, and it's just a fact of life. It's part of football. Adding depth is important. That's why it's important not to be top-heavy. But the reality is that just to me, from a fan's perspective, listen, nothing against the backups and the 3rd stringers. Sometimes you can have a guy show up and do a lot of good things. But in big moments against, primetime big games, I want to see the stars. I want to see the best players. I want to see the starters. I want to see what the team could potentially look like. And listen, when you play these games on 3 days rest, you get these weird injuries. You get guys with cramps. You get guys with back spasms, just like we see here from Malik Hooker. Again, the good news is that he seems to be okay. A lot of the Cowboys' injuries, Carson, Bland, right, they seem to be nothing serious at all, which, of course, is a good sign. The only one that seems to be long-term is, of course, Guyton, who probably will be out at least against the Lions, maybe more. But Nathan Thomas, guy to monitor, of course, to be a future tackle, potentially right tackle going forward, or him and Guyton manning the left and right going, depending on how they operate those 2 positions. But Nathan Thomas seems to be doing okay, not perfect, but okay as a starter in his stead. So again, I think the injuries, not as bad as they were at the first half of the season, but they're still an issue. And again, down the home stretch, depth is an issue. Wanye Thomas, backup safety, of course, is still hurt, right? Diggs should come back. So they've got some issues, right, when it comes to the secondary. But if they can avoid the big ones, Malik Hooker not being a serious thing with his back, that, of course, is a good sign as they get ready to play a really, really good Lions offense. All right, this is courtesy of John Machota talking to Jerry Jones after the game. And he says, Jerry Jones on Cowboys coach Brian Schottenheimer. I'm going to say the same thing about him as I can say about George Pickens, better than I could have hoped for. And I think Jerry Jones has kind of said what I feel right now about Schotty. When you look at everything Schottenheimer's had to go through, right? When you talk about the trading of Micah Parsons, when you talk about, taking over a team that was super top heavy, that needed to be completely revamped, right? Again, the 2023 Dallas Cowboys and 2022 Dallas Cowboys, but really focused on 23. Extremely top heavy veteran bunch, right? Cooks, right? Lawrence, Gilmore, Jordan Lewis, right? When you look at linebacker position, they had to bring in Kendricks as a stopgap in 2024, right? You look across the offensive line, Zach Martin, running back Ezekiel Elliott, right? It was a veteran old bunch that by the end of 2024 was basically completely revamped. And winning into 2025, a lot of volatility, young guys, rookies, inexperience everywhere, trying to rebuild a linebacker position from scratch. You had injuries. You had Diggs, supposed to be your star corner. Revel, young guy. Carson, young guy that you were really counting on, both injured, basically missing the vast majority of the first half, first two-thirds of the season. Overshown out the first half, first two-thirds of the season, right? And then, of course, you deal with the Nealon tragedy. You deal with a bunch of, Lamb misses time, Turpin misses time. Cooper Beebe, your kind of glue guy at center, misses a lot of time, right? It's, your backup running back. You need a veteran running back you can trust. He misses the entire year, right? Jaden Blue's the young guy you're hoping to count on. He's kind of a disappointment. Malik Davis has filled in admirably. But again, and that's not the case, what I'm describing is not unique to Dallas. Of course, they had the injuries at safety position, right, where they were down to third-string guys playing a lot of key moments, right? So, again, I'm not saying that the Cowboys haven't had adversity. They've had as much adversity as any team in the NFL this season. I would make an argument when you factor in the injuries, the Parsons trade, the Nealon tragedy, there has been no team that has faced more adversity than the Dallas Cowboys. I think it's fair to say, right? You can make an argument, one team, yeah, maybe, but when you talk about the emotional roller coaster of just everything going involved and around, and the fact that they played a tough schedule too, it's not like they lined up and played, not to pick on the Browns, but it's not like they've been able to play the Browns twice and, things like that, right? They've played some tough teams, right? They played the Eagles twice, right? They've of course had to play the Packers, right? We just saw them play the Kansas City Chiefs, right? They played a lot of good teams. The Broncos are one of the best teams in the AFC, right? Yeah, it's not like they've been perfect, the Cowboys, of course, but they've had to play some good teams, and the Bears, right? Bears looking like a really good team right now. So they haven't had a whole lot of breaks. They haven't had remember in 2023 after they lost to Philly to fall to 5-3. And for 3 straight games, they got a Giants team that was on DeVito and had basically given up on the season. They had a Panthers team that was young and new head coach, didn't have a lot of talent. Bryce Young, they're still trying to figure things out. And then they had a Washington Commanders team that was really struggling defensively, and their offensive team was starting to fall apart on Thanksgiving. Remember they had that 3-game stretch. It's okay, this is kind of we're 5-3. Where's the season going to go? And it's a get-right stretch. Okay, you have 3 games that you're going to be heavily favored in all 3. 2 of them are at home, right? The one road game is in Charlotte, which isn't exactly a great home field advantage. Panthers not exactly known for being I love Charlotte. I've been to Panthers games there. Beautiful stadium, beautiful fan base, but it's not exactly, going to Pittsburgh, going to Foxborough, going to Philly, right? Different kind of environment. And again, there was a get-right 3-game stretch, and the Cowboys got right? Your record gets better, you feel better about yourself. The Cowboys haven't had a stretch like that, right? You could make an argument that they had the Cardinals and then a bye, and then the Raiders was the closest thing they've had to that, right? But again, they had to deal with the Nealon tragedy. They had volatility with the trade deadline move. So they even had a stretch where they've been able to just say, okay, we've got a couple games where we're going to win, or we feel good about winning. We could go win 2 in a row, 3 in a row here, win 3 or 4 just based on the schedule, based on, we like our talent. We're playing, backup quarterbacks 2 of the last 3 weeks, right? Teams get those opportunities. Most teams do. The Cowboys have not had it. And despite all of that, again, not having the favorable schedule opportunities, the volatility, the tragedies, the injuries, trading Micah Parsons, it's the Cowboys and the media and all of that, all the new additions, scheme changes across the board, the Cowboys are 6-5-1. Credit to Schottenheimer, right? Again, far from perfect. There's a lot of things Schotty's done great. There's a lot of things I think he's done okay at. There's a lot of things he's done A++ at. A lot of things he could work on as well. But I think so far, I think Jerry Jones is right on the money here. Better than we could have hoped for. All right, let me scroll down here before my hands freeze off. It is like 20-something degrees outside right now, and it is cold. All right, this is courtesy of Joseph Hoyt here. He had a really good column. Recommend you guys check it out. Talking about Overshown and recovery and dealing with Britt Brown, the Cowboys director of rehab. But he posted, Britt Brown, the Cowboys director of rehab, keeps wondering when DeMarvin Overshown will have a bad day. But if he hasn't seen it over 2 traumatic knee injuries in 2 years, he probably won't. How Overshown is, excuse me, how Overshown is defying expectations. Yeah, DeMarvin Overshown to me is one of these remarkable human beings, remarkable players. Obviously, we've seen him play the last 3 weeks. He hasn't made that huge impact play yet. It's coming, folks. It is. You put on his film, you're like, the speed, the flashing, the playmaking, it is right there. And he's flying around, right? He's a guy that's, he's going to get a sack. He's going to get a pick. He's going to get a forced fumble. I mean, he already had a forced fumble against Kansas City, called back as a penalty. Ball went out of bounds. But I tell you what, he's making some good plays in space. Not perfect, but he's making some, he's getting very close to what we were seeing Overshown, around Thanksgiving time last year. He's not there yet. Obviously, get rhythm and timing, right? Listen, he's played a couple tough opponents, right? So it's going to take time. But the reality is, I mean, his positivity, his energy, his mindset. If you're looking for an example, I'm not just saying this for people listening, but just for me personally too, of just an attitude, just a guy willing to battle and overcome adversity, Agent Zero is the guy. I mean, the picture on the right, again, he's working with you can see the bandage around his knee with the walker. I mean, this is a professional athlete in his early 20s, peak of his physical prime. And he gets a severe injury, and what's he doing? He's going out there, he's getting working in the weight room, trying to get better, starting rehab aggressively. Right, this is a guy who plays and lives with positivity and energy, and I personally could learn from him. Again, I'm a lot older than Overshown, right? But I could learn a lot from what he's brought in terms of his attitude, his mindset. I think we all could. He's an A-plus player, phenomenal draft pick based on just culture alone. He's going to be he's a dynamic weapon for the Cowboys defense for sure. But in terms of who he is as a human being, he is the definition of a culture guy. He's one of these guys I'm excited to watch, and I will root for his entire NFL career and after as well. He's just an outstanding person and a great player, great mindset. Just a good example, not just for the Cowboys in the locker room, but for all of us. All right, this next report was a post on X courtesy of Brandon Laurie. He writes, former Cowboys left tackle Tyron Smith ran it with a 1.55 10-yard split at 34 years old. That time would have been tied for 10th fastest among running backs at the 2025 NFL Combine and tied for first among all tight ends. Tyron Smith is not of this planet. Yeah, Smith put out a workout video of him doing some pretty impressive things, and he's obviously an incredibly impressive human being physically, just with athletic skills and just incredibly gifted. One of the all-time great tackles for sure. He'll go down in the Hall of Fame at some point. Him and Zach Martin, obviously two Hall of Fame linemen. I think it does speak to the talent the Cowboys had in the Garrett era. I think obviously Smith played into the 2020s as well. But I think a lot of what happens when we look at Guyton, Terrence Steele, Nate Thomas, the curve that those guys are graded on is so crazy, because when Tyron Smith is the standard, I mean, no one can live up to that. I mean, you're talking Hall of Fame stuff, freakish level athleticism. So the fact that Thomas and Guyton have had their flaws, certainly Terrence Steele too, but when the comparison is this guy, I mean, you got to give him a little bit of slack. That grade curve is absolutely wrecked because of Smith. But I think it also speaks, and I've talked about this before, just the bummer of the 2010s and the missed opportunities, because you had a freakazoid left tackle, you had a Hall of Fame guard, you had good running backs, Murray and Elliott, two franchise quarterbacks, and Romo and Prescott, right? You had great tight end play at the end of his career, Jason Witten, great receiver play, Des Bryant, later had Amari Cooper in 2018, CeeDee Lamb in 2020, of course. You had a lot of great tools. Now, you can make an argument defense, outside of DeMarcus Ware in the early 2010s, he was obviously a great player, but the defense kind of, waned in talent as the seasons progressed. But they had talent. They had guys, and they were good teams. They were okay teams some years, and good teams, 14, 16, 18 come to mind. But it just speaks like, man, they just had some elite level talent. They had some special guys. And listen, there's a lot of teams in the NFL and every single season where teams have good quarterbacks and special athletes at key positions and star players, and they don't win a championship. They don't make a run at it, right? We see that happen all the time. It's not even a surprising thing, right? This team didn't make it. Look at the Baltimore Ravens, right? I think they've made, one conference championship in the Lamar Jackson era. They've got uber talent. They've got stacked defense, good offensive line, right? Great tight end play. Freakazoid, elite, MVP quarterback Lamar Jackson, great culture, great organization, good coaching staff, one conference championship appearance, a lot of playoff disappointment, right? We'll see what happens this year with the Ravens, of course. You get the same thing with the Buffalo Bills, very similar dynamic there too. So, Pittsburgh Steelers, throw them in the mix, right? So there's a lot of teams that have talent, have, all-time kind of players and don't do special things. But I look at those 2010s, and the thing that gets me is that I think the reason they didn't get there wasn't because of the players. And I think that's one of the reasons I get really frustrated when I look back at that era, and it speaks to the difference in coaching and why before Garrett and before Phillips, you had Bill Parcells, and even Mike McCarthy was so much better than Garrett. And Mike McCarthy, I think, he's a B coach, right? I don't mean that in a negative way. He's just a good, solid football coach. B coach, B minus, depending on, he was a B plus guy, but as, time progressed, he becomes a B minus guy because he gets stubborn. He wants to play a certain way, a certain scheme. His offense kind of felt archaic. But overall, I'd say a B coach. Jason Garrett was a C coach, right? They had A talent and a C coach, and they got a B team, right? You need a really, I mean, you can win a Super Bowl, right, with a C coach. You can. I think that's the Eagles, if I'm being totally honest, with Nick Sirianni. I think he's an okay coach. I think he's a C coach. The reality is, though, that was an A-plus roster. So they get to become a B-plus team and things break right. Vic Fangio is a great defensive coordinator. They go on a run and win a title, right? So credit to them for sure. So you can do it. It's just really hard. You just need a super roster and you need a lot of things to go your way. And the Cowboys, while they had talent, they had an A roster. They didn't have an A-plus roster in a lot of those years. And they didn't get the balances. We all know that, of course. And when you don't get those two things, you need better than a C coach. And Jason Garrett was a C coach. And Mike McCarthy was a B coach, and they had an A-minus roster, and they were a B-plus, A-minus team, and they just couldn't quite get over the hump, right? It's the reason they won three straight 12-win seasons, right? Because they had better coaching. Obviously, Micah Parsons and stuff. But remember, Garrett had DeMarcus Ware. So it's not like, Garrett didn't have talent. He had a lot of these guys, right? And they couldn't, they had the 12-win and 13-win season, one playoff win combined, right? Between 2010 through 2000, I guess two if you count 2010 to 2019. So you're talking about, let's just say 2011, 2019, you had 9 seasons, 2 playoff wins, right? 3 division titles, with a lot of talent. Mike McCarthy comes in 5 seasons, right? Basically half the years, 2 division titles, 1 playoff win. So you could make an argument it's very similar, but the wins and the way the game was played, you could tell the coaching, while not great under McCarthy, was a lot better than it was under Garrett. And I think it speaks to why Jerry Jones is much more positive on Schotty, better than he could have hoped for. Because he sees, the risk with Schotty was, is he going to be another Garrett? Is he going to be another C coach or worse? So far, through 12 games, looks to be even better than McCarthy. Looks to be at a very similar level as Parcells and maybe even Jimmy Johnson. Now, a lot of time left. He's got it wins matter, of course. But so far, so good from Schotty. And again, he deserves some criticism for some of the things that he's gotten wrong. But he's done a really wonderful job, I think, taking advantage of the talent they have and making changes, holding down the fort, being the leader, being the culture guy, and guys like Jason Garrett and to a lesser extent Mike McCarthy, they weren't able to take advantage of freakazoid athletes like Tyron Smith. The Cowboys with Pickens, they seem to be taking advantage of it this year. So again, just how they're using them, how they're game planning, things like that. So credit to, I think this post right here just reminds me of why getting the head coach hire needs to be a critical move for any team. And while the Cowboys and their process may not have been ideal for bringing in Schottenheimer, he seems to be, at least at this point, a pretty solid addition. All right, let's get into this next report here. On that topic, there's a theme today, pro-Schotty theme today. This is courtesy of Pro Football Talk. That's Mike Florio's website, for those of you who aren't familiar. He posted, as the Cowboys make a late push for the playoffs, Brian Schottenheimer makes a late push for Coach of the Year. And obviously, Florio is a big name in the NFL media space. There's a lot of stuff at NBC, of course, Sunday Night Football. And now we're seeing a theme kind of go around bigger media entities, right? Because we've been talking about Schotty, and the Cowboys fans have been saying, listen, he's doing some good things with the offense, culture guy, right, bringing some energy, weathering the storm with the Parsons trade, dealing with the kneeling tragedy. Like a lot of people sort of around the fringes in sort of big NFL media spaces said, yeah, it seems to be doing a decent job. But after beating the Eagles and beating the Chiefs in back-to-back weeks, 3-game winning streak coming out of the bye, again, offense still looks good, right? Not perfect, but still looks very good. Defense playing better. Culture, energy, keeping on, all that kind of stuff. Now we're seeing media folks say, like, listen, Schotty is actually a pretty good coach at this point. And I think that's a big change. It's a big sea change. And I think it speaks to one of the underrated elements of Brian Schottenheimer and really the Dallas Cowboys now, is he becomes the guy you root for, right? He's the guy that was the coach everyone hated, right? Remember when Dan Campbell was hired for the Detroit Lions? Everyone mocked the Lions. They said this is the dumbest hire in the world. Got off to a slow start his first year, and they've obviously been doing a lot of winning since. People have turned around on Dan Campbell. Schotty, people don't root for Dan Campbell. People root for the Lions. Now, I'm not saying most of the football world will turn around and root for the Cowboys, but you look at Brian Schottenheimer, what he's done, the leader of this team that he's become. Everyone's saying we follow him. He's a great leader. Love him to death. The tough decisions he's made. Benching Lamb and Pickens. Benching Trayvon Diggs. Right? Weathering the storm in a lot of tough situations. Making brutal changes on defense. Making some cuts. Making some tough firings. Kyrie Elam. He makes his tough changes but keeps the culture together. This is a guy that's got all the makings of a good coach, and we're starting to see a lot of people in the big media space start to realize it. All right, let's get into the comments here before I freeze to death. This first comment is from Guadalupe Chavaria 1227. 2026 NFL sleepers, talking draft. Safety Terry Moore, 6'1", 200 pounds. Duke and corner. I'm sorry, he's attends Duke, and cornerback Devon Marshall, 5'11", 200, North Carolina State, 4'41". Yeah, so safety position is going to be interesting for me what the Cowboys do, and I think it depends on stylistically how they want to go. Do they want to get another Donovan Wilson type? Obviously want to be better than Wilson. Or do they want to get just another rangy safety who can do a little bit of everything, kind of like Malik Hooker? I don't know a lot about Terry Moore. I kind of put the draft stuff aside until after the season. This is how I like to, I like to let it play out, right? Because there's some guys that look good during the regular season and then they emerge in a college football playoff run or they have a great bowl game. I kind of like to wait till after the season to see how things shake out, just because that's just me personally. I don't like jumping the gun. Senior Bowl can happen, all-star games, but definitely safety and position for sure is going to be a focus for the Cowboys. This next comment is from OneUpD808. He writes, I love how Schotty was calling the game. Spags would go too high and Schotty would pass. When Spags went one high, Schotty would call run. That's how diverse our run game is. We can all the opposite call on certain looks at defenses in. Love it. Would never see this from Garrett or Mike McCarthy. Yeah, I think Romo actually mentioned it during broadcast as well. And that's one of the things that Schotty is outstanding at. The way he calls the game, the way he sets everything up. He basically puts these guys in a blender. He says, defensively, you got to play perfect. And he almost forces defenses, and we've seen it in back-to-back weeks. Vic Fangio and Spagnuolo, they've got their attitudes, they've got their attacks, they've got their approaches, and they love matching up a lot of times corners and DBs one-on-one so they can do their exotic blitzes, a lot of exotic zone coverages and disguises. And one of the things that Schotty has done, and I think it's really smart, he says, listen, you go one-on-one with Lamb or Pickens, we're going to throw it to him. Slant, curl, vertical, doesn't matter. And they get a lot of penalty calls because, again, corners can't hang with these guys. And the arrogance of Fangio and Spags has basically created the Cowboys with an opportunity in those two games where Lamb dominated against Kansas City, Pickens dominated against the Philadelphia, and the other guys, of course, had moments. Lamb with his 50-yard catch despite the drops against Philly. Pickens, of course, with some clutch plays against the Chiefs. But all the penalties come together just because these guys are so arrogant, right? These defensive coordinators, for good reason in some instances. But Schotty does a good job capitalizing on it. And again, the way he marries the run and the pass game and does it consistently, it forces these defensive coordinators to basically say, listen, are you going to go to your players and say, we got to change everything we do because the guy on the other side, he's got my number. Right? And that's hard to do if you're a defensive coordinator. Eberflus has struggled with that, and everyone was very critical of Eberflus for saying he's being very arrogant and he's not willing to change. Schotty has brought forth the same conversations with the two most respected defensive coordinators in football, Vic Fangio and Spagnuolo. Credit to him for sure. David Moses 884 writes, the win against KC was another statement win. This was probably the best game they played all season because you can't count out Mahomes till it's over. Yeah, and again, they lost a turnover battle. The Chiefs 3 for 3 on fourth down. Right, the Chiefs had 2 fourth down and basically goal situations, and they scored touchdowns on both of them. Right, they didn't turn the football over. It's one of those things where it was they got red zone stops. The Chiefs did. So it's one of those things where a lot of things went well for Kansas City. They had a better special teams day than the Cowboys did, for example. Right, so it was a game where Chiefs played pretty well. Mahomes was outstanding. If you really break it down, Mahomes was fantastic when you look at the film, and the Cowboys were better. Again, just like Sunday against Philadelphia, it was a great comeback, but the Cowboys were better. And overall, the Cowboys were the better team than the Kansas City Chiefs on Thanksgiving, despite, again, losing the turnover battle, the Chiefs going 3 for 3 on fourth down, and Mahomes playing outstanding. Credit to the Cowboys, again, getting the job done. Che2E, I wonder if Chase stylized with the 2, perhaps. Quinnon being able to rush to pass rush and run stop has helped so much. You can pair him with Kenny for a run stopping monstrosity or pair him with Osa for a crazy pass rush. Overshown being behind them helps so much, and they're all helping dudes like Ezzy and Sam Williams thrive. Holding Saquon at 22 yards, so put the holding on notice. This is a different D after the bye. With 3 first-rounders, we could get another great O-lineman, then put the other 2 in defense. This could be a great young scary team with the prime Dak at the helm of it all. Yeah, and that's another thing to consider. People look at Prescott. I mean, he is getting up there a little bit. But it's not like the dude's 38, right? So again, people wondering, oh, you're wasting Prescott. And this isn't, and I'm going to talk about it in the coming days, guys, because we got some time. When you look at the numbers, and I understand the eye test, Prescott's been outstanding. I'm going to make an argument here that this is Prescott's 4th best season, either 3rd or 4th best season, right? And I'm not counting 2020, right? We put up crazy numbers before the injury. And I'm not saying Prescott's playing poorly. He's playing very, very well. But this isn't a season where he's just been like on an unstoppable tear. He's had a lot of bad. Right, a lot of real duds, a lot of bad throws, a lot of bad series, a lot of turnovers. 3 straight games with a turnover. Did you know that? right? If you look at Dak Prescott, if you go back to before the bye, right? 5 straight games with a turnover, right? Denver, Arizona, and the last 3. 5 straight games Dak Prescott has turned the football over at least once, right? Is that the sign of the quarterback having a, I mean, go back to 2023 when he was playing an MVP level. Go back to 2016, 2019, right? The 3 years that come to mind for me. Didn't happen with Prescott. 5 straight games with a turnover. Again, he could only get better. I'm not saying they're all his fault. I'm just saying, like, that's just a fact. So Prescott, I think, could actually play better. And when you added more talent, a couple more years in the program, Pickens year 2, good things can happen. This next comment is from Art Vanderlei, 6974. Ezzy was absolutely hogtied on that last KC touchdown pass. Oh, yeah, it was one of those things where, and I looked at the film, and I've got, again, like I said, an Ezraku film review out. There was a bunch of times where, like, Quinnon Williams was totally mugged on one play for sure they didn't call. There was another play where he was literally grabbed, and I think it was Williams grabbed and thrown down to the ground, and they didn't call it. And, of course, the Ezraku holding penalty there. There could have been at least 2 or 3 more. Like, the Kansas City Chiefs offensive line by the end of the game, I mean, they're just getting eviscerated. But on that final drive for Kansas City where they scored, the refs were just like, we're just going to let him play. We're just going to let him play. And there were at least 2 holding penalties that should have been called that weren't. So, again, it's people that get caught up in penalties and the refs and things like that. Listen, there are some calls that are so egregious in certain situations. The Dez Bryant catch thing comes to mind, right? But the reality is, over the course of a long game, the Cowboys were clearly better. And if you actually look at the film, the Chiefs, if we're being honest here, kind of got let off the hook. And if you look at the defensive penalties for Kansas City, the reality is they were arrogant. They decided to go man-on-man, tight coverage. Same thing that Philadelphia did. Said, oh, yeah, our corners, they can match up with CeeDee Lamb and George Pickens one-on-one. I mean, come on. Why would you do that, snap in and snap out? But they just stuck with it, and it cost them. All right, this next comment here is courtesy of Anchors Away, 9893. Number 1, family circus struggle is real. Happy that the family is with me, but yeah, logistics is a challenge for sure. I mean, I'm trying to avoid frostbite here, for God's sakes. But it is good to see family, no doubt. Duke is correct, and I have a high threshold for holding penalties, and it was pretty blatant the entire contest. Yeah, I mean, it was... I can understand the officials, because especially when it comes to a penalty-filled game. Here's my problem, though, with that is it can be a penalty-filled game, which it was on Thanksgiving. Listen, Thanksgiving can be very sloppy. We saw that in the Lions-Packers game, for example. We saw it in the Bengals-Ravens night game. It was a blowout, but again, same kind of dynamic. It can be a little sloppy, not a lot of rest, kind of a chaotic environment for every team involved, late in the season, injuries, things like that. But the officials, if it becomes a sloppy game, sometimes they swallow their whistle in the fourth quarter. And to me, it's like, listen, just call it consistent. Just call it straight up. They called the game a certain way for 3 quarters, and then the fourth quarter, they're like, all right, listen, you guys are on your own. Right, figure it out. And listen, the Cowboys were able to come out on top, but boy, oh boy, I thought there were at least 2, maybe even 3 Chiefs holding calls, at least in the fourth quarter, that should have been flagged, but weren't. But all's well that ends well. Number 3, the victory is a memorable one. Super stoked today. It was also a great game to watch. Yeah, it was. I wasn't feeling so good when it was the interception and a quick 7 and then 14-7. I was like, man, this defense is getting eviscerated. But they kept battling. They kept competing. The defense is playing better for sure, getting stops. But they've got some severe flaws. Linebacker is still an issue with Murray. He's having issues. Overshown isn't all the way back. Safety position still isn't great. And they got a young secondary. Edge rush still lacks depth. So the defense is so much better than it was, undeniably so. That's just a fact. But they still got some flaws. The Cowboys beat the Lions, and the NFL has a serious effing problem on their hands. The team sneaks in the playoffs. They'll be very dangerous. You have a defense that is steadily improving, an offense with a ton of firepower. They could be a threat. Yeah, I mean, I'm a big believer in just taking it one game at a time. My whole shtick that I use every season is I don't even talk about playoffs for any team until after Thanksgiving week games are done. So after Monday Night Football, after the Patriots play the Giants Tuesday morning, okay, now I look at the playoff picture for the first time. I don't do that until then. And then I really don't even start seriously considering it until Christmas Eve, Christmas time frame. Because so many things can happen, right? Collapses happen. The Cowboys have collapsed. The Cowboys have surged, right? And you just don't know how things shake out. So I kind of like to wait and see. But it is interesting that the Cowboys are getting a lot of momentum at the right time. And, of course, we'll see what happens. BMR Collects writes, Lamb was awesome yesterday with so much goofy talk about how Pickens is better because CD had some drops. Like I said, can't we just be thrilled to have 2 studs at wide receivers? Pickens had a crucial drop yesterday, and I haven't seen it mentioned, but he also made several crucial plays after that drop. It's all part of the game. All wide receivers have drop passes from time to time. Yeah, that's a great point. Remember, Pickens did have a terrible drop. It's a slant. He was wide open, right in his hands, and he dropped it on 3rd down. Pickens has had some crucial drops. He had interceptions that basically made the Bears loss in week 3. That could have been a game down to the stretch that could have gotten very interesting. But Pickens, again, had a deflection off his hand. Should have been a play deep into the Bears territory. Ended up as an interception. He had a drop pass on 3rd down. The Cowboys, again, were leading against the Packers. Had a chance to drive to go up 2 scores early in the second half. Pickens dropped an easy slant. Would have been a 1st down. Would have been a big play. And, the game would have been different, right? I'm not saying the Cowboys would have won, but they could have. Right, obviously had a big drop against the Chiefs. And Pickens, of course, has been playing outstanding. And he had that fumble, too. Great effort from Turpin to recover that fumble. So it's one of those things where while Pickens played extremely well and has been playing extremely well, he's not perfect. Nobody is. But Lamb stepped up in a big way, especially early on. 3 third downs, a touchdown, and then, of course, that big 50-yard play to really flip the field when it was 28-21. Lamb had a monster day. Great job, CD. And again, like you said, I agree with you 100%. Let's enjoy the fact that there's 2 stud wide receivers for the Dallas Cowboys, and the Cowboys have a great chance to lock both of them down for the long term. Obviously, Lamb already locked down. All right, Travis Graham, 76-36 writes, I swear we could have had 6+ sacks, but due to Mahomes being, Mahomes, he did an insane job of navigating the pocket. Not many QBs can do what he did yesterday, in my honest opinion. Yeah, 100%. Mahomes had an outstanding day. Outstanding day. He was phenomenal. Not perfect. Missed 1 or 2 throws, but he managed the game beautifully. 3rd down scrambles, making people miss, keeping plays alive. Phenomenal day from 15. I mean, he had a great day. Credit where credit is due. Ronald Alexander, 55-17, writes, the wins over Philly and KC should put the NFL on notice that we are coming for one reason, and it's not Lamb and Pickens. It's the interior play on both the offensive and defensive lines, and it can be summed up in one word, dominating. Booker, SAE for a couple plays owned by, I guess you're saying except. Booker, except for a couple plays, owned Chris Jones, just like he did with Carter. They are young and under contract for the next 3 years. We may come up short on making the playoffs only because we need a few teams to fall apart, but the future, if Dallas can stay healthy, just watch this space. Great all-around game in all 3 phases. By the way, Dak is the truth, and don't let anyone tell you differently. Yeah, Prescott played extremely well. He missed a few throws. Obviously, that interception on the opening drive was quite awful. But, outside of that, he had an A-plus game. I think overall another good game from Prescott. But even then with Dak, the thing that, I talked about this a second ago, this isn't his best. This isn't the best. Dak is playing great, but this isn't the best Dak. We've seen amazing Dak in 23 and 16. They definitely jump off the page to me. And I think Dak can go back to that level in, 25, 20. This is more 2021 Dak kind of vibe, right? We're playing really good football. Just turnovers a little high right now. Not all his fault, but turnovers are a little high. If he can manage the turnovers a little bit and continue to be hyper efficient like he's been doing, watch out. All right, this next comment here is from CFlim6252. Excellent video, well done. We appreciate the effort. Well, I appreciate the comment. I know this isn't exactly the best production value right now. But again, got to do what you got to do, right? Dealing with family and the logistic challenges this time of year. Dino Lachav, 9397, writes, I believe your neighbor watches the show and turns on the sprinkler to get mentioned. Yeah, no sprinklers today. So I guess he must have had it on a timer and he realized that he was watering his lawn below freezing, which isn't a smart move to make for anybody involved. But yeah, hopefully he does. I think he's from like New York though, so probably maybe a Giants fan. So I don't know if he watches the show. Delta704 writes, the whole time I was watching this game, I was thinking we were playing better overall. I was thinking about it because of the stat breakdown you did with the Eagles on Monday. Yeah, they outplayed the Chiefs. Didn't blow them out, but they definitely outplayed a great team once again. Yeah, it was one of those things. Is if you can't take away plays, but if Dak doesn't throw the pick, if the Chiefs don't go 3 for 3 on 4th down, you look up and that's a 14-point Cowboys win. Right? You can look and say, okay, 10-point swing with the interception with Prescott. Let's say they get stopped on one of those 4th downs. That's a 7-point swing. You suddenly look up and the game looks more like 35-21, right? Same thing with Philly, right? If you don't have the deflection on the block punt, it's called roughing the punter. You don't have 2 early takeaways. You don't have the Cowboys getting stopped twice on 4th down in scoring territory. You look up and you're like, that's a 10-point 24-14 Cowboys win kind of thing, right? So the Cowboys have outplayed their opponent 3 straight games. And I think that's really important to note, right? It's not just the fact they're winning, it's that they're playing good football. The real Daryl 282 writes, the fact that Dallas is committed to the run game should be applauded. They're wearing teams down and it keeps opposing teams from playing coverage to defend the pass. Yeah, it's one of those things, and that's, again, a credit to Schotty and Clayton Adams. Because they're committed to it, it helps the pass protection out for sure. And the moment teams make a mistake, they gash you. We saw that with Chris Jones jumping around the block against Tyler Booker, Malik Davis with a 43-yard score. It forces teams, and we see this with Javonte Williams, by the way, burst some runs when teams are like, okay, we got to go full coverage, 2-minute drill, 2-minute situation. We're going to go wide pass rush angles, light box, and then they just run it up the middle and gash them. For, obviously 2 big plays. I think we look at the Washington run and, of course, the run against the Jets as well. And that's just what the Cowboys can do. If you give them a light box, they will eviscerate you. And credit to Schotty for sticking with it. The lack of red zone running is a little frustrating sometimes, but overall, his willingness to stick with the run has proven to be awesome. I think in all except one game this season, the Cowboys have eclipsed 100 yards rushing, and they've done it a bunch of different ways, whether it's Williams having great days, whether it's been multiple backs doing good things, whether it's been Turpin getting involved, whatever it may be. The Cowboys, Jaden Blue having a couple games where he got some touches. The Cowboys have done it a bunch of different ways, but they've been very good and very committed to running the football. Dallas Bailey 831 writes, hair looks sharp. Thank you. I appreciate that. Finally got a cut. It was getting way too long there for sure. And then Delta 704 with the second comment to button this up today. He says, replying to your response to my comment, beating the last 2 Super Bowl winners back-to-back on a short week sure looks like championship football to me. What do you think? Yeah, one of the things I always talk about is because in order to win a championship, you need to be able to win and play well 3 straight weeks, right? Because listen, if you get a bye, right, you have divisional round, you have conference championship, and then the Super Bowl. So you have to play well 3 straight weeks, ideally against playoff teams. And the Cowboys have played well back-to-back weeks, overall well 3 straight weeks. Again, the Raiders, again, not a good team, but still they played well and outplayed 2 playoff teams in back-to-back weeks, back-to-backs, the last 2 Super Bowl winners. So yeah, they're definitely trending in the right direction. For sure. And they're a team nobody wants to play. Lions and Chargers are looking, they're fighting for playoff lives. They're like, great, we got to play the Cowboys. Not an ideal draw, at least the way the season's going. But you never know, right? I think these things kind of come in phases. The season kind of oscillates back and forth. So I think at this point, you just take it one game at a time. But I tell you what, the formula for success is there. We've seen it. And again, it hasn't been perfect. Not at all, right? We saw the 1,000,000 drops by CeeDee Lamb. Right, struggling on 4th down in the red zone, right, 4th down stop and interception in the red zone, Turpin fumble, right. We've seen the issues with penalties at times this season, right. We've seen Pickens had a key drop, right. It hasn't been perfect. Dak Prescott 5 straight games with a turnover, and he's had a lot of turnovers this season. Not in terms of leading the NFL, but in terms of overall elite quarterback play. He's been great at everything, just a couple too many turnovers for my book at this point. So it hasn't been perfect. That's the thing that's so optimistic about the future, not just for this season, but going forward, is that they're playing basically they're outplaying good teams, and they're playing B football, their version of B football. They could play B plus A football and then start eviscerating folks, right? If Prescott, again, doesn't turn the football over, if bounces go their way, they start getting some interceptions, this thing can go really well, really fast, whether it's this season or the future. All right, that's enough of the comments for today, guys, as my fingers aren't falling off quite yet, but they certainly feel that way. Not that I'm complaining, because I'm talking football. This isn't exactly hard. There's a lot of people out there, and you guys, some of you guys probably are those people who have a lot harder jobs working, of course, around the holidays. And listen, shout out to all you guys. Again, happy Thanksgiving to everybody who, if you missed either the Thursday or the Friday show. It's a wonderful time of the year, holiday season. I love this time of year. You got college football. You've got, of course, rivalry week is here, obviously. Any Longhorns fans, obviously pretty stoked about what happened last night. Congrats to you guys. See if they get the playoff or not. That could be interesting. But we've got, obviously conference championship weekend. We got Heisman. We got, of course, NFL season in full gear. And it's Christmas time, most wonderful time of the year. So really pumped for all that, guys. And the Dallas Cowboys playing good football just to be the cherry on top. And I will be here tomorrow, of course, as I always am. Check out the Ezra Aku film review if you haven't seen it yet. Nate Thomas film review coming soon over the next couple days, so keep your eyes open for that as well. But until tomorrow, I am Nick, and this is Saturday Morning Inspection.